Stepping down, Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy announces he is retiring. We have reaction from the High Court and the White House. Political upset. A 28-year-old stuns the Democratic establishment in New York. We have a recap of all the primary action from last night. Help is on the way. A Cardinal-elect from Iraq gives us an update on persecuted Christians there. And papal greeting. One of our own comes face-to-face with Pope Francis. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, June 27th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. The future of the Supreme Court could dramatically change. Key swing vote Anthony Kennedy will retire, and now there's a surge of activities in the nation's capital. Correspondent Jason Calvi is outside the Supreme Court with the details. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Wyatt. Kennedy was the key swing vote protecting Hobby Lobby, but he also ruled on redefining marriage and upholding abortion as a constitutional right. He's also an important vote on issues like guns and campaign finance. His departure could tilt the court conservative for years to come. And now Congress is ready to fight, even before the president nominates Kennedy's court-changing replacement.
The president must appoint a fair-minded and open-minded jurist in the mold of Justice Kennedy, a centrist and moderate who will listen to his colleagues.
Blumenthal says that includes on issues like abortion. I spoke to Republican Bob Corker about this historic opportunity to fill another high court vacancy.
You know, elections have consequences, and the president gets to determine who he nominates. And I have to say he did an outstanding job with the last pick, and I was very impressed with him, and I have been with, his rulings.
The Senate Majority Leader predicts they'll vote this fall on President Trump's nominee. After the death of Justice Scalia, McConnell refused to act on President Obama's nomination of Merrick Garland. The seat was left open until after the 2016 presidential election, when President Trump picked Neil Gorsuch. And I heard at least one Democratic Senator, Patty Murray of Washington, and now Senator Bernie Sanders adding to that the nomination, the confirmation vote shouldn't happen until after the midterm election to allow the American people to have a say. Wyatt?
Jason, what's the overall mood like there? Like you say, you've been talking to a number of senators.
Yeah, it's just breaking, so we're just getting a chance to talk to the senators. I know Senator Blumenthal said he was shocked by the news. Other senators have taken to the Senate floor to praise Anthony Kennedy for his 3 decades on the high court, but still this news is still breaking here, and we're still getting all the pieces of the puzzle put together. But I know several Democratic senators have brought up the issue of abortion, showing just how important Kennedy's swing vote has been on that divisive issue.
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reporting from the Supreme Court. Thanks, Jason. President Trump thanks Justice Kennedy for his service and says the search for a new Supreme Court justice will begin immediately. White House correspondent Mark Irons continues our team coverage. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. President Trump called Kennedy a man of tremendous vision and now says he is prepared to nominate the next justice from a previously compiled list of 25 candidates.
We have a very excellent list of great talented, highly educated, highly intelligent, hopefully tremendous people. I think the list is very outstanding. When I was running,
The pro-life group Susan B. Anthony list also praised President Trump's list of possible replacements for Justice Kennedy. They say President Trump now has another crucial opportunity to restore respect for life and the Constitution. The Senate votes to confirm a president's Supreme Court nominee. It's a Republican-controlled Senate, the balance of power at stake in upcoming midterm elections. Today, a reporter asked if the president would wait until after the elections to nominate Kennedy's successor. The president said he hasn't really thought about it, but added, "I think you want to go as quickly as possible." Wyatt?
White House correspondent Mark Irons reporting. Thanks, Mark. Before the announcement of Justice Kennedy's retirement, the Supreme Court issued another 5-4 decision. The court rules government workers cannot be forced to pay into labor unions for collective bargaining.
That's all we're asking for is a choice. And if people want to join the union and they want to collectively bargain, that's fine. I have no problem with that. They should have that choice.
The decision eliminates the so-called fair share fees non-members pay to unions. The court ruled the law violates the First Amendment by compelling workers to support unions. The unions say the outcome could affect more than 5 million government workers in about 24 states and the District of Columbia. Joining me now for more analysis of the retirement of Justice Anthony Kennedy is Hans Von Spakovsky, Senior Legal Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Hans, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about the timing of Justice Kennedy's retirement. It's effective into July 31st.
Right.
Does this decision have anything to do with the political landscape and where we are right now?
Well, yeah, I think he's giving the president time enough to get somebody in place for the October term when the Supreme Court starts up again. Today was the final day of the Supreme Court. They released their final opinions, and this is enough time. People should remember Elena Kagan was nominated in May of 2010. She was confirmed by August, and so if we follow that timeline, it gives the president enough time to get somebody in by October.
Well, the next appointment will be President Trump's second pick for Supreme Court Justice. The first, of course, was Neil Gorsuch. So tell me a little bit about, is this a chance for him then to lock in sort of the conservative control of the high court, if you will?
It most certainly is. Look, Justice Kennedy has been a great justice on many issues: First Amendment, Second Amendment, and voting rights, campaign finance laws, etc. He unfortunately has sided with the liberals on a lot of social issues such as gay marriage, abortion. And here's a chance to get somebody who's going to be a solid conservative, not just on the First Amendment, Second Amendment, religious liberty issues, but also on these other important issues.
You mentioned some of those other cases, the high-profile cases like abortion, for example,
yes,
where Justice Kennedy has sided often against pro-lifers in many of these cases. So how important do you think it will be for the president to support and bring in somebody who is pro-life, and how do you think that's going to impact the potential confirmation hearings?
Well, it's going to be very important that the president, when they are looking at nominees, explore that particular issue and make sure this is somebody who's pro-life. Well, how's it going to affect it? Well, keep in mind that when Neil Gorsuch was confirmed, the Republicans followed what the Democrats had done before, and they broke the filibuster rule. Mm-hmm. So the Republicans are only going to need a majority of votes, not 60, to confirm whoever the president sends forward, and they've got a majority right now. So that's going to make it a lot easier to get somebody in.
President Trump is said to already have a list of candidates ready to go.
Yes.
Any favorites at this point?
No, I don't have any favorites. As you know, he came up with that list actually before he got elected, and there are a lot of good people on them. A number of the people on that list have already been confirmed to federal courts of appeals, and those are folks who could fairly easily be moved up into the Supreme Court.
Okay, well, like our Mark Irons was reporting, it sounds like the president wants to get this done quickly. So Hans Von Spakovsky, Senior Legal Fellow at the Heritage Foundation, thanks so much for your analysis.
Sure, thanks for having me.
We are also covering a political upset in New York. The number 4 House Democrat, Joe Crowley, is defeated in his party's primary. Crowley was considered a candidate to replace Nancy Pelosi as Democratic leader, but he is now the first Democratic incumbent to fall this primary season, taken out by a 28-year-old supporter of Bernie Sanders. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi also filed this story today.
I'm going to grab her. She's right here.
Newcomer Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez beats 10-term Congressman Joe Crowley. She says he was absent from the district, which includes Queens and parts of the Bronx.
We won because I think we had a very clear winning message, and we took that message to doors that had never been knocked on before. We spoke to communities that had typically been, I think, dismissed, and they responded.
What happened in New York reverberates in Washington, with some speculating the divide between the party's pragmatic and more liberal wings is growing.
Well, it was a shock.
Congressman Stephen Lynch is one of 63 Democrats who voted against Nancy Pelosi to be Democratic leader, wanting fresh leadership. What does this say about change in the leadership moving forward?
Well, I think that's a question for another day. Certainly, Joe was one of the people that we were looking to, but I think again, we've got primary elections coming up, and so I think probably that's a good question the day after the last primary.
Leader Nancy Pelosi urges restraint, saying not to read too much into last night.
The fact that in a very progressive district in New York, it went more progressive than, well, Joe Crowley is a progressive, but more to the left than Joe Crowley is about that district. It is not to be viewed as something that stands for everything else.
Reporting here in Washington, Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
On the Republican side, we may be closer, one step closer, to a Senator Mitt Romney. The former Republican presidential nominee won the Utah primary. He's one of 3 President Trump endorsed last night who all won. The other 2 were New York Republican Representative Dan Donovan and South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster. Vice President Mike Pence uses his trip to South America to send a message to migrants.
Don't risk your lives or the lives of your children by trying to come to the United States on a road run by drug smugglers and human traffickers. If you can't come legally, don't come at all.
Today, Pence visited a migrant shelter in Santa Catarina Church in Brazil. It houses people fleeing the deteriorating conditions in Venezuela. Back in the U.S., a federal judge ordered the Trump administration to reunite thousands of migrant children with their parents within 30 days after families caught illegally crossing the border were separated. Defense Secretary James Mattis and China's president strike a positive tone following their meeting today in Beijing. The leaders discussed increased military cooperation and more open dialogue. The discussions come amid a possible trade war between the U.S. and China, the world's 2 largest economies. The White House is hopeful Beijing will push North Korea to eliminate its nuclear weapons program. Poland changes its controversial law on Holocaust speech. Parliament today eliminates the threat of prison for those who accuse the Polish nation of being complicit in Nazi crimes. The law is intended to defend the country, which lost 6 million citizens to the Nazis in World War II. Critics say the law had the opposite effect. The State Department condemns violence in Nigeria over the week that left 200 dead and more than 50 houses destroyed. The clashes primarily were between Muslims and Christians. Muslim herders are seeking land for grazing. They fought Christian farmers who own that land. Police say militia members among the herdsmen started the attacks, adding some of the weapons and how they were used remind them of terrorist tactics. A United Nations official denounces Myanmar's government for a lack of cooperation, saying in a report lawmakers no longer are helping with efforts to document abuses against Rohingya Muslims. The government says the report lacks objectivity. 2 bishops from Nicaragua will give Pope Francis an update on their situation in their country. Weeks of protests against President Daniel Ortega have resulted in more than 200 deaths. The church has mediated the on-again, off-again talks between the government and opposition groups. Tomorrow, Pope Francis will elevate 14 new cardinals. They are the church leaders who are tasked with electing a pope. And for the first time in nearly a quarter century, Pakistan will get a red hat. Archbishop Joseph Coots says it's an honor for his country.
Of course, there's great joy, but it's also a big responsibility, and I don't know how I will be able to live up to it. That's the big thing. It's nice to receive all the congratulations at this stage, but the tough part lies in the days ahead.
Coots says the reaction he got in the Muslim-majority country was overwhelming. Catholics make up about 1% of the population there. Another soon-to-be cardinal is Luis Rafael Sacco. He's the head of the Iraqi Chaldean Catholic Church. Today at a press conference, he told EWTN News Nightly that aid is finally coming in, but there is still a bigger issue.
Our problem and or the challenge of the church is how to keep them there in the spot, not to leave. We have to find for them schools, dispensaries, infrastructure, but also some jobs. And if we get this money, we can do a lot for them.
Patriarch Sacco says it's not just the United States helping. Hungary and other countries have sent aid. Earlier this week, Vatican correspondent Juliet Lindley spoke to Sacco about the reaction he received since the news he's become a cardinal.
It was a feast, a big celebration among Iraqis, because for them this is really a sign of hope, but a big support internationally. And many Muslims called me, or during 2 weeks I was receiving people just to for congratulations for that. And I hope I can do a lot for them.
Now, Chaldeans have a rich history in Iraq. You now become a prince of the church. What are your goals as cardinal for your country?
As a patriarch, I am the head of a local church, but now with the universal church is something different. This is giving me, more courage and more space to move and to work, especially in the society, Iraqi society, but also in the politics.
You invited the Pope to come and visit your country. How much can we hope that that's going to happen and when?
He likes to come. He told us, I am ready to come. And whenever they need me, as a pastor, I like to go and to support them. But the situation now is very complicated. And now we have had elections, and we don't have the formation of a new government. We have to wait, maybe later, but not.
A cardinal is a sign of martyrdom. The red that you wear represents the blood that you're willing to shed for the church. How do you see your new appointment in the light of the martyrs that your country has had?
Before the cardinal, a patriarch also has a red habit, just like the cardinal. And our church, Chaldean church, the Church of the East, is a martyr church during the whole history. But even now we are giving martyrs. And I do hope that the blood of the martyrs will be fertile, bring us a future, bring us a new situation.
Our thanks to Vatican correspondent Juliet Lindley for that report. Coming up, Prince William sits down with the president of the Palestinian territory. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. Prince William met with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas today during his trip to the Palestinian territories. Palestinians hope the Duke of Cambridge's visit will help their relationship with President Trump's administration. Prince William's trip is not considered political, but could possibly enhance his international credentials. The Prime Minister of Malta says a humanitarian rescue ship stranded at sea for 6 days will be granted safe haven. The 200 migrants who were rescued by a German ship off the coast of Libya will be vetted to determine if they are eligible for political asylum. Joining me to talk more about the migrant situation in Europe is Robin Simcox, the Margaret Thatcher Fellow for the Heritage Foundation's Davis Institute for National Security and Foreign Policy. Robin, welcome back to the program.
Great to be with you.
Members of the EU have been, at least the next 2 days, for meetings and talking about migration. Of course, it's going to be just big on the top of their agenda. How likely is it that member states will be able to agree and come to a practical agreement on shared responsibility?
Well, I think it's going to be difficult because it's not as if this is a crisis that has just begun. This has been rolling on for years now, and Chancellor Merkel, who is obviously associated with this crisis, perhaps more than any other political leader, is also politically weak at the moment. That goes along with the fact that there's more of a anti-immigration sentiment in the European Union more broadly, or at least very much more reluctance to take in such large numbers than there was in 2015, say. So I think it's going to be tricky.
Let's talk more about German Chancellor Angela Merkel, because you mentioned the politics that she's having to deal with in Germany. There's internal political challenge from her interior minister on the issue. So they want to turn migrants back, or some of them do. How likely is this to impact the Chancellor's future as the leader of Germany?
Well, it's very likely. I mean, if Chancellor Merkel can't deliver some kind of deal with the EU that she can sell politically in Germany with the coalition partners that helps prop up her government, there's the possibility her government will fall. Chancellor Merkel obviously is a skilled negotiator, but I think it's very tricky for her to be able to keep all of the competing parts here happy. And I mean, it just goes to show when Chancellor Merkel took in such a large number of people at that time, as she did in 2015, it was probably a bit of a short-sighted move on her part in being able to keep together German society and the political culture more broadly.
The European chief for the UN Refugee Agency is quoted as saying, "We do not have a crisis of numbers. We continue to have a crisis of political will." You had mentioned 2015 as a big year with the number of migrants reaching Europe reportedly lower than at its height of that year. So are politics getting in the way of really handling this humanitarian situation?
I would reject that comment. I don't think this is a problem of political will. It's a problem of the fact that this was a policy, an open borders policy pursued by certain politicians that didn't really have any support among the broader general public. It certainly didn't have the support to sustain year after year. And so this isn't just a problem of politics. It's the fact that ordinary Germans, Italians, Greeks, Portuguese, French people look at the change that is happening in their societies as a result of Merkel's very liberal approach to borders, and they're saying to their leaders, we have to slow down, we have to stop these policies. It's not political will, it's to do with popularity in Europe itself.
Do you think some of these internal divisions, like we've seen conflicts between France and Italy, can be resolved?
Well, it's tough for me at the moment to see how they will, because the lines seem to be hardening. Mm-hmm. You're seeing anti-immigrant parties, or parties that are critical of open borders, gain more and more power in Europe politically. They're being voted for more and more. And so you hope some kind of compromise can be reached, of course. But at the moment, with the way the political parties are aligning, it's tough for me to see how that measures up.
Yeah, well, obviously it's going to be one that we're going to continue to follow here and impact so many people across the European continent. Robin Simcox, Margaret Thatcher Fellow at the Heritage Foundation, thanks so much for your analysis.
Thank you.
Up next, Holy Father tells us what we need to live a Christian life. And a dream comes true for an EWTN News Nightly producer. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte reaches out to Catholic leaders. The effort comes days after he called God, quote, stupid. He did so while discussing the story of Adam and Eve in the Bible. The president says he wants to repair the relationship with the church, and the country's Catholic Bishops' Conference says it is willing to meet with him. The Philippines is roughly 80% Catholic. Pope Francis says the Ten Commandments are an invitation to lead a true Christian life.
La vita cristiana è anzitutto la risposta grata.
At his weekly audience at the Vatican, the Holy Father says the first commandment identifies God as the one who loves us and sets us free from the slavery of sin, adding our works will always succeed if they begin with gratitude for that love. And finally tonight, one of our EWTN co-workers lands in Rome, and in less than 48 hours, he met the Pope. EWTN News Nightly producer Rodney Harris attended the Holy Father's general audience and was happy to see the Holy Father approach him. He told Francis he's praying for him and gave the Pope a relic badge of Blessed Solanus Casey, someone Rodney has a strong personal devotion to. Rodney will be helping with our coverage of the installations of 14 new cardinals this week, and the Vatican will be enjoying Rome until late July. What a blessing, Rodney, and we can't wait to hear how you're going to top your next 48 hours while in Rome. I heard someone joke that maybe you'll join the Swiss Guard. Well, that does it for us for tonight. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We're back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.